You know, in retrospect, it seems as though the work that I'm doing now and where life has sort of taken me all makes perfect sense, but I had utterly no idea what was around the corner. My background is in Middle Eastern studies, and I was living in Egypt when the war started, when we invaded Iraq. And I was a student at the time, and all I really knew was that I was opposed to the war, and because I had this background and I could speak the language, I felt an obligation to try to go and help with the reconstruction. I didn't feel that there was any ethical way to, sit out the reconstruction. And so I went not knowing what I was getting into, but I arrived on January 2nd, 2005, and worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, first based in Baghdad. And almost from the beginning, I realized that we had zero capacity to trust and zero capacity to understand or hear. And the work that I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes, I think it was almost inevitable. When I got to USAID, I was the only person in the mission that spoke any Arabic out of 140 people working for USAID. We had employed a staff of around 150 Iraqis who, immediately after the invasion, ran up next to our Humvees, came and knocked at the doors of the Green Zone and asked how they could help. These were Iraqis who had grown up on American films but had never met an American, and who were supportive of the invasion. They were thrilled that we were there. And they wanted to try to help us out and to help us achieve what were some of our stated objectives, which were to rebuild the country. What I found so staggering within the first few hours of getting there was that we had this cadre of highly educated Iraqis who we were using for the most pathetic manual labor, that we almost immediately conceptually put them in a caste below us. And so we had lawyers and doctors driving us around as chauffeurs and cleaning our toilets for us. And we proceeded month after month having these high-level meetings with ambassadors discussing the future of Iraq and the programs that were to be initiated to help the health sector or the education sector, and there was never an Iraqi present. Now, I quickly grew sick of the Green Zone because I didn't want to go to Iraq to basically, party, which is what happens a lot in the Green Zone, oddly enough. And I didn't feel like I was in the Middle East. I had lived in all of these countries in the region, and I was in this very bizarre sort of other world of paperwork and then just drunk contractors who were throwing parties. Like one day there was I'll never forget, one of my first days there was Talk Like a Pirate Day and Dress Like a Pirate Day. And so people walking around the Green Zone dressed like pirates. So the whole thing was fairly incongruous when I was there, but it wasn't until I agitated to leave the Green Zone that I started to see the implications of that lack of trust, that lack of investment in the Iraqis who were closest to us. I was sent to Fallujah to coordinate the reconstruction efforts there in the city. I every day sat across the table from tribal leaders and sheikhs and other business leaders with Marines on either side of me. And the relationship was destroyed by the fall. Nobody trusted each other. Even recognizing, I'll tell one anecdote. I had spent the last 10 years of my life studying the language, the history, the culture, and one day I went to meet with the city elders to try to resolve one problem, which was that the Marines were occupying 4 of Fallujah's 7 schools. And so the remaining 3 schools were overcrowded, they were getting run down, and education throughout the city was just suffering. And what I was trying to do was to negotiate to find, are there other buildings that the Marines can decamp to, and so that we can free up these schools. And all of this, my intentions were to help the youth of Fallujah. And 5 minutes after I get out of that meeting, I have to crawl into the back, an open-air tub, they call it, but the back of a Humvee. And my job, since I was the dopey civilian that didn't have any weapons, my job was the swatter, where there had been a number of kids in Fallujah who would run up and throw grenades into the back of these tubs, and Marines were losing limbs. And so, I could never tell if they were joking or not, but they told me my job was to be the one that would swat the grenade out before it blew up. And so I would sit in the back of the Humvee every day, sort of trying to gauge my hand-eye coordination, but also, and this was the most depressing part, and I don't know that I've ever recovered from it, but looking at children as lethal threats. And you look at these kids as potentially out to kill you. Now, that was something that I've been wrestling with ever since, but I realize as a nation we are now stricken with. I took a vacation from Fallujah, and this is where you can see the story take a sad turn. I took what was supposed to be a 5-day vacation to meet with my family in the Dominican Republic. And the second night there, I suffered what they think was a fugue state. But basically, the sense is that I thought I was still in Fallujah, and I sleepwalked out of my second-story window at a resort and fell 18 feet hitting concrete. I broke both of my wrists, my jaw, my nose. I cracked my skull in 2 places and split my face open to such a degree that I needed around 70 stitches. The whole way to the hospital, I was confused. We crossed a bridge that I swear was the Fallujah bridge that they hung the Blackwater contractors from, which was the whole reason we went into Fallujah. And like that, my year in Iraq, 365 days to the day, I was pushed back in a wheelchair back to Chicago, and all of the projects that I've been trying to set up in Fallujah completely unraveled, and my ability to try to do something that I'd worked so hard to get to that point in Fallujah was yanked from me. And then all of a sudden I went from the most important job I've ever had in my life to lying on my back in my childhood bed with casts on my arms and a mask on my face, and my mom trying to dump soup into my mouth. And when something like that happens, especially after a year of near misses of bullets and mortars and car bombs and things, I mean, the notion of irony, just as an aside, is completely gone now to me. I'm the guy that takes a vacation from Fallujah to have his near-death experience in the Caribbean.